Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me on this Wednesday, May 25th in the Locher Room. I'm Alan Locher. Singer and songwriter Trey Pearson is an independent artist who is here today to discuss his new music and new album, Somebody You Knew, due out July 1st, and getting back on the road for a summer tour. With his band Everyday Sunday, Trey sold hundreds of thousands of records along with millions of streams of his music. He has scored 5 #1 US singles and 20 top 10 hits. His song Wake Up earned the title of most played Christian rock song of the year, and Best Night of Our Lives broke into the coveted Billboard 200 chart. Trey has toured performing his music in all 50 states and 20 countries. In 2016, Trey, the founder and owner of Everyday Sunday, came out of the closet to make national news. His announcement started a national conversation with his television appearance on ABC's The View. Trey has been featured in the New York Times, Billboard Magazine, CNN, and more, as his story became the #1 trending topic worldwide on Facebook. In 2017, Trey was nominated for a GLAAD Award for his appearance on The View. He has performed at Pride festivals all around the country, and he released his debut solo single, Silver Horizon, and premiered the music video on Teen Vogue. Billboard Magazine did a feature on Trey for his debut solo album and premiered the title track, Love is Love, which I love. Trey released Can't Go Back, the first single off his new album, on April 22nd. The second single, Piedmont Park, on May 3rd. And he just released an amazing new song called Broken Heart last Friday. It is my pleasure to welcome to the Locher Room, Trey Pearson.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here, Trey. I appreciate it. I have to tell you that a good friend of mine, Bill, shared your story with me last year. And Bill, like you, is gay, and with his husband has 2 children
Wow.
as well. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But speaking of your children, how old are they, and how are they doing?
Yeah. My daughter Liv is 12 and my son Beckham is 8. And they're awesome. They were very young when I came out of the closet. I was married previously in a heteronormative seeming relationship, and grew up with a lot of religious baggage that made me feel like it wasn't okay to be who I was, and it took a while to undo all that. But yeah, they're great. They're they've grown up in a way where they've never been brainwashed to believe it's bad to be gay or anything like that, and very much used to being around LGBTQ people, and very we live in a wonderful neighborhood where lots of their friends have LGBTQ parents. It's very normal, so it's good.
That's awesome, and we'll come back to that. Any signs of them following in your footsteps?
Musically?
Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't sure if you meant that or being gay.
Oh, no. Too soon. Too soon for that.
Yes.
Too soon for that.
So yeah, I mean, they both have beautiful voices. They both, stay in key, have good pitch, all those things. But as to whether it will be a passion of theirs to write or perform music, I'm not sure.
Okay. So take me back to your childhood in Ohio. What were you like as a kid?
Yeah, I grew up just outside of Columbus, Ohio. I live in Columbus now. I live in a great neighborhood in the city called Grandview, and 5 minutes from downtown. Very walkable neighborhood, which I love. I grew up about 20 minutes from here in a small town, and it was only 8 miles from the Columbus border, but you would have thought it was a completely different culture and place. Very conservative, very especially at the time, even when I was growing up, still very anti-LGBT, and very religious, and grew up in a very religious family. My grandparents lived in this town, my aunt and uncle, my cousins, and I grew up going to church, being taught that God loved me, but also that learning very young that if I were to be gay, that God would think that was an abomination, and then I wouldn't be loved by God. And, I assume, having that overwhelming feeling that if God thinks I'm an abomination, then of course my family would too, because they want to follow God and love God. And so, grew up, started praying from a very young age, please God, don't let me be gay. I was taught it was a choice. I was taught that, that basically it was a temptation from the devil if I had any of those feelings. And I couldn't even admit to anyone I had it because it was such a shame. And of course, as it does countless LGBTQ people, I got all kinds of deep issues from that, right? And there's a lot that messed me up by trying to be something I couldn't be. And I think about all the, I've had several years now to process all the trauma that I got from that growing up, but it definitely weighed on me a lot, and on top of all that, growing up in the early 90s, before there was any kind of known help for HIV or AIDS, my uncle became HIV positive and died of AIDS within a year. And yeah, thank you. And it was just one of those things that became taboo that our family didn't talk about. And that's sort of just the way that I grew up. Wow. And I think,
wow, to have that, the religious aspect, and then have that happen where they didn't talk about him, must have really. What age did you really, know that you were different? I mean, did you know from a young age?
I don't know. I think there are, I think that when did you know question is always kind of a loaded question, because I think you may know certain things, but obviously you don't have the tools to process that. And so you might know on a certain level and then also not know at the same time. And so I knew I wanted to be close to other boys as a kid. I knew that I never was attracted physically to girls. And then, as adolescence kicked in, I knew that I had these feelings towards boys, and I felt lots of shame about that. But I wouldn't have said I knew. I would have thought, oh, right, well, that's a temptation from Satan. And I got to do everything I can to not be that. And so I knew, of course, by the time you're old enough to have any of those adolescent feelings, sexual feelings, of course, I knew what was causing them. Right. I just felt so much shame that I was burying it and not admitting it to myself. And you start doing compartmentalizing, and that does all kinds of things to your psyche, and it messes you up in a lot of ways. And of course, eventually, the way it plays out, it ends up affecting you big time, but it ends up affecting other people as well. And
absolutely. I came out at a different time in the 80s. And so, and people have asked me, when did I know? And, in the 80s, there was no role models or internet or any of that. So I had no concept of what it was. I had sexual experiences in high school with other boys, but again, no words to describe what that was.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine, as difficult as it was for me, because of, I'm sure, shame and fear of how people would treat me. I can't imagine having that religious aspect on top of it, telling you such negative connotations about yourself, like that added pressure of that really on young children is sadly an awful experience that I'm sorry you had to go through.
Thank you. Yeah, it's and unfortunately, I know we've come a long way and it's happening less and less, but it's still happening to countless kids growing up in, suburbs and rural areas, in churches, evangelical churches, mega churches, Catholic churches, other religions, feeling like it's not okay for them to be who they are. And so as thankful as I am that we've come as far as we have, and that you can see things like, Netflix Heartstopper now, or Love Victor, or Call Me by Your Name, or so many of these wonderful things. And And because of the good thing about YouTube and social media is kids knowing they're not alone, that they're not, there's more access to this information, but it's still a long way to go from people not growing up being brainwashed to believe there's something wrong with them. And yeah.
I love that you say that, knowing you're not alone, because absolutely, you know, those shows, the internet, I mean, I couldn't, you know, I wish, you know, I talk about, I say it all the time on this show in real life, you know, when I'm talking to friends, you know, I wish there was a show like Glee that had come around when I was a kid to see other people like myself. It was, you know, I thought that show just, you know, was an amazing opportunity for kids to see other kids like themselves.
Absolutely.
In whatever spectrum, gay, music, you know, musical, all
yeah.
you know, from A to Z. What's your earliest memory of singing?
I think it started where I knew I loved performing in elementary school. There were plays and stuff we did, and one of my teachers at the school encouraged my mom to have me go get involved in theater downtown Columbus. And so my parents both worked in the city, and my mom decided to let me go audition for a play. And my first show was Pinocchio. It was a children's theater. It was all children in this one. And then after that, I just got the itch to perform on stage. And so I decided to try out for a musical, which was Scrooge. And this was at another theater that had adults and kids, and, you know, more of a semi-professional theater. And I got the part as a street kid in Scrooge, and I just loved it. And I just kept doing theater all through middle school. And that's really what gave me the confidence to sing and to sing in front of people and to perform in front of people. And then I also was honestly meeting, you know, it was still long enough ago in the 90s where kids weren't as openly out as they are now, but there were other, you know, closeted gay kids like me in the theater, but there were out adults. And sometimes it felt a little don't ask, don't tell, but you know, as far as a lot of these adults, but I knew, you know, one that was in a relationship with another man, and some were a little more bold about it. And this was after my uncle passed away. And I do remember my mind searching so hard to try to understand it. And also still wanting to understand why I believed what I believed with my faith. And I think I was probably at some kind of place where maybe if life happened a little bit differently, I might have been able to accept myself at a way younger age. But I honestly got invited to a youth group at a mega church in the suburbs of Columbus. And that really definitely cemented the path I ended up taking, as far as I, you know, found other kids that would write songs and play them for the youth group. And I thought that was cool. I grew up teaching myself. I loved performing in front of people. I was like, oh, I could do this. Found out about Christian rock music, and found a place where I felt obviously not accepted as a gay person, but acceptance in my faith. And so it was really what took me on this journey to try to live in this sort of fundamentalist Christian way that obviously ended up doing a lot of damage in my life. But that was the path that I'd been taught growing up, and that was my place to kind of find community in that. And so I ended up, I think probably a lot to do with my religious feelings, got away from theater, but I started my Christian rock band at 15 turning 16, 16 turning 17, called it Everyday Sunday. And then after my freshman year of college, I signed a record deal with that band, and that's when I started touring the world. And that's sort of the path I ended up going down.
Where'd the name come from?
Everyday Sunday. To be honest, it was like probably subconsciously inspired by a band I liked listening to called 7 Day Jesus. It was sort of the same meaning. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was I don't know, popped in my head, and I started. It seemed like a good enough band name that I started, recording and putting out music with the guys that I put together a group of guys at 16, and by the time we were 18, I already had different guys coming in, so it was kind of this interchanging group. And then at 19, that group of guys we signed the record deal with and put out our first album at 21. And yeah, so sort of kind of went from there. And I don't know how many of your people watching have any growing up with Christian music, but for me in Columbus, we like a lot of times it was more adult contemporary stuff like Amy Grant or things like that. But in my generation, there came along these groups like DC Talk and Newsboys, and like Christian rock became, at least in the evangelical world, it became cool. And so we definitely.
What defines Christian rock?
Yeah, I think it became very broad in the late 90s and through the 2000s. And, it was definitely people singing about their faith, but not every song had to be about your faith, but a lot of them were. And sometimes they were just about life from maybe the perspective of being a Christian. I don't know. It definitely got blurry at times, for sure. And so I definitely was inspired by bands like Switchfoot and Reliant K that didn't necessarily have every song about their faith, but it had to do with other things in life too. And so that's kind of from the perspective that I wrote, but I always wanting to be honest in what I wrote about. But there was this huge part of me I was not able to be honest with myself about, let alone anyone else. And there was, as somebody who always wanted to be very self-aware, there seemed to be a very major lack of self-awareness in this huge part of my life. And so it is interesting because there are songs that I'm still very proud of that I wrote with my old band. And a lot of time it was the ones that was searching for meaning, searching for understanding why I was hurting. And to be honest with you, some of those songs mean more to me now than they even did then. And they felt honest, but I did not have that full perspective yet. And so I also, starting to tour around the world with this band, stopped believing in the idea of Christian music. I think the word Christian makes a lot better now to describe your faith or who you are as a person than it does to an adjective to describe a genre of music or to describe like a restaurant or a movie or any of those things. I think that it becomes a marketing tactic, and I obviously did not quite understand that as a kid. I just was so into finding this acceptance, as far as what I wanted to be with the faith I was given growing up, and obviously still compartmentalizing a lot. It was sort of this thing that I felt like was honoring what I thought God wanted me to do. And I do now, after having kind of gone through that world, seen a lot of the dysfunction that brings and actually a lot of the harm that brings. But that was kind of the place I was at in the world view that I grew up in.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's go back. May 31st, 2016.
Yeah.
You released the coming out letter to friends and family. How long had you been contemplating sending that?
Yeah, so I guess you'd have to back up to the beginning of fall
of
the year
2015.
before. And that's kind of when my life hit the fan. That's when my wife asked me if I was gay after several years of marriage and 2 kids. And this was this taboo thing. Growing up in the evangelical fundamentalist world that I grew up in, things being taboo that you just don't talk about is status quo. That's like par for the course. That's normal. And we had definitely failed in intimacy in our marriage, the entire marriage, and had never even made out with a girl before I got married, never done more than a pet kiss goodnight. I had gone into my marriage as a deeply brainwashed person by this system, believing hoping, fingers crossed, that everything would just magically work on my wedding night, because I also grew up in sexual purity culture where you wait to have sex till marriage and God will honor that. And even though, I always wondered why all my friends struggled with that, that was not a struggle for me. And so it was easy to wait because I didn't want to have sex. And I was a hopeless romantic. I loved the idea of, all of those things, but I realized very quickly the beginning of that marriage how much things weren't just going to magically work. And then I felt like a failure then too. I felt like, oh, is it because I've thought about guys all these years, never been able to admit it? How do I get better and change this? And kept hoping it would get better through my marriage, and it never did, but we never talked about it. And all of a sudden I found myself years into a marriage where the same things I was hoping would change the first week of my marriage, I was still hoping they would change. And
she came to you.
She did. I don't think necessarily because she wanted to, but just some things happened where we kind of got put in a position where we needed to talk about it. And and so, yeah, it was really, really difficult. I'd never been able to admit to myself out loud that I was gay, let alone anyone else. And by this point, I'd been touring around the world with my band for over a decade. I was also growing and changing and progressing in the way I even saw my faith, and the way I saw the Bible, and the way I saw being gay. Like, to be honest with you, at this point in my life, I didn't think it was a sin to be gay anymore. I just didn't feel like it was an option for myself because I'd committed my life to this person. So I still, when you compartmentalize and push things down your whole life, I was broken and paralyzed in the sense that I couldn't even go there for myself to allow myself to think about it, And even though deep down there were these struggles and these things, I just did not have the tools to know how to deal with them. And so, yeah, one beautiful thing about getting to see the world with my band is that you see different cultures, you see people that believe differently than you do. And, I didn't really see the Bible in that fundamentalist way that I did growing up. I didn't think it was inerrant or infallible, or all these words we come up with to say, oh, God wrote every single word of this, and if you don't believe that, you can't be a Christian. And I was like, oh wait, Jesus never actually said that in any writings about him. And the whole thing is about loving your neighbor, and that's what it is to love God. And Jesus even says that's the most important commandment, right? And so, which now I'm very not fundamentalist. I don't really care what you believe or don't believe, or what faith tradition you grew up in. I see a lot of beautiful things from the one I grew up in, and I see a lot of toxic, damaging things from it as well. But so I am, doing a lot of work personally to grow in that sort of faith tradition I was handed growing up, but I still hadn't been able to come to terms with myself. And so when my wife at the time, my former wife, asked me if I was gay, I had everything racing through my mind, knowing how broken our marriage was, and not being, of course, not wanting to lose my kids or not be in the same house as them all the time anymore, but also going, oh, this is so broken. And if I say that I'm not, it's going to make everything even worse. And I'm not going to deal with all these things that I know are going on deep down that I haven't dealt with. But I can't say yes. I've never been able to say I'm gay. And so all I knew how to say in that moment was, I don't know, but I think I need to get help. And she said, okay. And I had met affirming pastors at this point. I had met the first gay pastor I'd ever met in my life, touring and traveling, playing a festival. And I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know there were gay pastors. And I was like, wow, so the previous year I had met a gay pastor for the first time, or maybe it was over a year.
I gotta say, touring really had to be a huge blessing for you.
Oh, absolutely. And probably also made it easier for me to maybe get through the hard parts a little more, because it's not like we were in under the same roof every night. There were the moments to get away and try to recalibrate, reprocess, like how to go back in to those times together and hopefully do better, which of course never happened in that intimate sense, of course, because it's impossible. We both needed different things. And anyway, so I reached out to this affirming pastor friend of mine. I started telling him everything I'd felt since I was a kid. And for the first time in my life, I said out loud to this pastor, I said, I think I might be gay. And I started bawling. And he got me with a therapist friend of his. And over those next several weeks and couple months, my former wife and I talked to this guy separately and then together. And during that time, I came out to myself and then eventually to my wife and my family. And so that was September 2015. And I promise you, from the end of September 2015 to the end of that year, there were not 5 days that I didn't completely bawl my eyes out, because I had gone decades of my life not dealing with this thing. And finally, to have that thing that's so buried deep down finally come up, and you're just finally starting to allow yourself to process that and grieve that. It was heavy. And so during that time, I had a big falling out with some bandmates and a pastor, and people were happy to gossip about me, and some things were true and a lot weren't. And I realized people were trying to tell my story for me. And I knew I wanted to come out publicly, but I really wanted to do it on my own terms. And I didn't like that other people were deciding how that was going to go for me.
And so everyone deserves to come out on their own terms.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just felt like, okay, well, I know that this is important to do. Maybe one day it won't in such a public way, but right now, when there are still kids growing up in the world I grew up in, it's important for us to tell our stories. Yeah. That way, those people can, I know that it's the million stories I heard that finally allowed me to accept myself, right? I know it's the visibility in media that finally allowed me to accept myself. I know that it took a lot, right? And it's not just like one person, it's all these things. And so I thought, well, if I can use my story to help somebody else that's gone through a similar thing that I have, then I want to do that. And I knew I wanted to do it for those people. I knew I wanted to do it for my children. That way, one day, as they get older, they can continue to understand my heart and what I went through, and I, you know,
and the struggle, because it was definitely a struggle.
Yeah, and I knew, you know, I know to this day, Christian rock stars that are in the closet, that if they would have come out when I was a kid, how that could have changed my life. And I thought, I want to do this differently. So
how did you feel when you first hit send? Was there a bit of relief?
Yeah, and fear, but not the same kind of fear that there was before, right? This was more just like, I hope the whole world doesn't hate me. But I became so broken, and I had been so miserable trying to be something I couldn't, that I finally had to become so self-aware and do the work to process this stuff, that I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I don't care if everyone hates me. I just can't be dishonest about this anymore. You know, like I felt like I'd been beat up so badly that the worst of the worst happened to me. And I just thought, it doesn't matter. I just want to be honest and do the right thing, and hopefully do it in a way that can help somebody else. That's literally just where I got to. I thought, well,
I'm sure you have helped. I mean, can you describe, you know, the day before your appearance on The View, and sort of the next?
So So May 31st is the day the story came out. I was so nervous. And also with my kind of religious baggage growing up, I didn't drink alcohol until I was 30. And so I,
Wow.
yeah, so I was very scared of getting drunk because I thought God would be angry with me. Everything was always this fear that God would be angry with me. And so the night before, I will say is definitely the most drunk I had ever gotten before. And I'm sure a lot of it was nerves, but I was with some people that had become friends because as I was coming out, I was losing everyone in my life, almost everyone, and slowly rebuilding new community. And probably a few too many IPAs and shots of Fireball. It was not a good combination, but I woke up feeling a little not great, and so I went back to sleep. And when I woke up late morning, I had all these missed calls from the Washington Post, Billboard Magazine, NBC, and I looked at my phone. I was like, oh my gosh! Like I knew it was going to be out. I knew people would talk about it. I had no idea how talked about it that it would be. And so all of a sudden I looked, and by that afternoon, it's trending in the top 10 worldwide on Facebook. They used to show you the top 10 trending things on the side of the Facebook page. And I think it was that night, it was the number one trending topic in the world. And I was like, what? Like how, Calvin Harris and Taylor Swift breaking up was number 2. And I just thought I saw my name at number 1 and I just had the worldwide trending and US. And I was just like, how is that possible? And of course I've done thousands of shows around the country, around the world. And we had some success, but we weren't like the biggest Christian band in the world or anything, but had a handful of number 1 singles. And I just thought, well, I knew people would talk about it, but I just did not know it would be that talked about. And then I realized how many people grew up like I did and how many people would probably listen to my band at some time in their life. And I guess it just, in writing out that coming out letter that I posted and shared, I wanted to get it right in the sense that I wanted to be as vulnerable and honest as possible without trying to bash anybody else. I just wanted to share it as honestly as I could. And I thought, well, if people are going to hate me, then I'm going to do it as vulnerably and honestly as I could. And I had no idea the amount of love that I would get poured out on me. And 6 years before I came out,
which certainly helps, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was very surreal, and the whole thing was surreal. And then, yeah, of course, after it became the number 1 trending topic in the world, The View called, and I didn't have a publicist, I didn't have a manager. Like, I just thought, I'm going to put this out there, and hopefully a little love comes in to drown out some of the hate. And I just gave me a little hope that the world is changing a little bit, right? Obviously, I believe we have a long, long way to go still, but
we do.
To get to share my story and to have this influx of messages on Facebook and Instagram and all the Twitter and all these things of people sharing their journeys back with me and telling me how much my story moved them. It was unbelievable. I just the most beautiful thing. And I know there were people angry with me for sharing my story, people in my family and old church friends and people that thought, how dare you do this, because it was embarrassing for them. And I just thought, you know what? The fact that there's people telling me that they didn't take their life because of this story, people that said they were able to come out because of this story. And I know it wasn't just this story. I know it was probably a lot of other beautiful messages from other queer people. And I know that because that's part of our journey as LGBTQ people is our stories, right? It's what has helped us get as far as we have. And I thought, well, I continue to think if my story and my journey can be one more thing that helps somebody love themselves and come to terms with themselves, I wouldn't trade it for the world, and I definitely wouldn't trade it because it made some people uncomfortable or embarrassed. And there's a lot more important things at stake, and that really was the drive for me to do it, and why I continue to do the work that I do today with my music and my art.
Incredible. I am so sorry. I know you lost your father this year,
Yeah.
and I know that
Thank
was
you.
a difficult road, him accepting you, it's very brave. I mean, your dad knew you were gay. I sadly never told mine before he died.
Mm.
Um, and I know, it's a tough thing. At the end of one of your Instagram videos, and I'm blanking exactly what you said, but it was a post to your parents. Do you remember what you said at the end? I think it was um, about loving, being able to accept your children or something like that.
Yeah. I haven't thought about that one in a little bit, but it was, it has been an extremely difficult journey when it comes to my parents. And unfortunately, I never got to find that healing with my father before he passed away. He had some sort of, I think it was a heart attack or something like that at the wheel while he was driving. And my parents were in a car accident back in February. Um, I've gone through so much heartache with my dad, and I have talked about it publicly because I know there's countless other people like me that are going through the same thing and have gone through the same thing. And, I begged him for years to just try to love me, to be in my life, of course, I wanted him to try to understand me, but at the very least, I wanted him to just um, try to love me, and even though I see my faith differently than he did, um, just to know that my heart is to want to love and to love myself. And I begged him to try before it was too late. And that was just um, this year before he passed. And after I started dating my boyfriend, Jonathan, my first boyfriend, my dad refused to meet him. He did incidentally meet him when my sister was in the hospital for like a couple minutes, maybe less than 5. But yeah, it just was this thing he just could not get past. And let me back up. A few months before that happened, I wrote a song to my parents called Broken Heart, which just came out. And I got the final mix of the song.
It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I got the final mix of the song a week before the accident, and obviously devastating. And after the accident, my mom was in urgent care, and she was in a very scary place, especially those first days. But she was in the hospital for several weeks, and then eventually moved over to a rehabilitation center. And all of a sudden, my mom was back in my life in the sense that I was staying nights sleeping in a chair at the hospital with her, and me and my 2 older sisters being there every day for her, taking care of her. And she definitely apologized for how they handled things after the accident. And I know we have a long way to go, but there is a little bit of hope there where she wants to be in my life and my boyfriend's life and my kids' lives. And it's been very, very difficult. And obviously I cannot imagine what she's going through, but few weeks before the accident, she reached out saying her and my dad were willing to get coffee with me and my boyfriend, and it never ended up happening. And I like to think that it would have, but either way, I know that it's weird. The song "Broken Heart" is just about me dealing with all these feelings of wishing my parents wanted to be in my life and would be in my life and love me for who I am. And it's weird that I got answers. I know so many people can relate to that and desire that, especially LGBTQ people. But it was hard getting the answers to that question the way that I did with my father passing away, and now I'm having my mom back in my life, but she's trying, and
that's all we all can ask for.
I don't know what this journey will be like as far as where she'll be willing to go to try and actually process what I've gone through, but it's definitely the most hopeful that I could have ever imagined since coming out. So, yeah.
Well, I think the biggest point of all of that is don't wait till it's too late for anybody.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I ended that video that you asked about.
Right? Try to patch it up.
Yeah.
How has fatherhood changed your life?
I don't think I ever understood the idea of unconditional love until my children were born, and having those kids to just look at them and have so much love for them rocked my world. And then I do think on several levels, as they started getting older, me thinking about what am I going to teach them? Am I going to teach, especially when it came to the deeper things of life, right? And I think that helped me continue to do the work for myself to understand why I believed what I believe about different things, whether it's about faith or being LGBTQ or all kinds of different things. I do think that pushed me to want to be better, to want to understand more, to do the work. And then, I think, even coming to terms with accepting myself and loving myself, having those kids helped me realize that one, they didn't need to grow up in a broken home just so we could all be together all the time. But what they needed was me to be able to love myself. That way they know it's okay for them to love themselves, right? And how everything I do is teaching them. It's an example to them of how they're going to deal with things, right? And so I don't know, it's definitely my favorite thing in the world is being a dad. I love it. I love the conversations we have together, the times we have to just be together and do things together and experience things together. And it's definitely the greatest thing in my life for sure.
They're at an interesting age because, sure, they ask a ton of questions, with everything going on in our country and so many states trying to pass the ridiculous "Don't Say Gay" bills.
Yeah.
Do you have a conversation or try to explain even what that is?
Yeah, we have lots of conversations about that stuff, and they're very aware. And thankfully, they're growing up in a community that would never put up with any of those things. And it's very important to me that they see it from a young age, that they know what's going on, and also that they have hope, right? And so, we definitely have conversations about those kinds of things all the time.
That's awesome. A week from today kicks off Pride Month.
Yes.
Here you are, at this point in your life, what, when you think of that word, what does pride mean to you today, Trey?
It means a lot of things, but, growing up in evangelicalism, pride was such a bad word because pride before the fall. But I've learned as an adult that this is a different kind of pride. This is the kind of pride that knows it's okay to love yourself. And so, gosh, this is definitely my favorite time of the year. In 6 days is my outiversary. I obviously have my new album coming out. And then also, besides next week being my outiversary and anniversary of being on The View, I also have my PBS special coming out called True Colors next Saturday, and it's their first LGBTQ Pride special. And it's me, it's the Indigo Girls. It's all with the American Pops Orchestra. So I'm doing a few of my new songs with the American Pops Orchestra, which was a wonderful experience to perform with an orchestra, songs that I wrote for the first time. But there's a few drag queens from RuPaul's Drag Race that are on there. And speaking of Glee, Chris Colfer, Chris Colfer. He does a couple songs on there. It's just this really beautiful special but it's going to be.
And that's George Saturday, June 4th. Saturday, June 4th, right?
Yes. And George Takei is narrating it, and it's sharing LGBTQ journeys. And then the trans woman from Jeopardy hosts the whole evening, that won like 40 times this last year on Jeopardy, setting all kinds of records. And it's just this sort of celebration of LGBTQ people and our stories. And so I say all that to say, I think the special really hits it on the head, but it's about pride in loving ourselves, but also pride in where we come from and understanding our history as LGBTQ people, and how much the people that have come before us have had to work to get to where we are now, and how much work we have to do now to keep going. And there is a pride that we take in that, as far as knowing our history, knowing, the Stonewall riots, but also what all we've had to go through before and since then to get to where we are. And to me, that is definitely sort of what I think about when it comes to pride. It comes to thinking about, it is okay to love yourself. And as RuPaul says, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anyone else? And
I get an amen up in here.
Amen. Exactly, yes. And so to me, that's what it's all about. And it's about teaching my kids these stories. So, and, for them, whether it's them being LGBTQ or their friends, that they know how important this is, and how far we have to go, and why this is also important. And yes, Pride started as a riot. It started as a resistance march, and there is a lot to celebrate, and I'm all for celebrating during Pride. But it's also a lot to remember that we have to continue fighting. And when you see these bills pop up, like the Don't Say Gay bill, and there's even that kind of rhetoric trying to be passed in Ohio right now, it reminds me, gosh, this could affect my kids. And yes, and what's amazing is these people that do this shit is that they can be like, oh, what, you got gay marriage, you have all the same rights we do now. What are you complaining about? It's like, you didn't even want us to have it a few years ago, and now there's people that want to reverse it, and right. It's just insane, and it's continuing to point out and expose the insanity, and because this younger generation is not going to put up with it. It is.
I hope so. And you seem in an amazing space, Trey. You really do.
Thank you.
You really do. We need to talk about this new music.
Yes, let's do it.
Somebody You Knew. Where does the name of the album come from? I'm sure it's a track, but tell me.
It's not the name of a song, but the idea came from the opening track on the album, which is coming out next Friday, which I have not told anyone until now. So there you go.
Oh, awesome.
The song is called
It's
called Stay Golden Pony Boy, and it's the song I wrote to somebody who I lost a relationship with when I came out. And it's a very heartbreaking song, but it's just that person is somebody that I knew, and I am somebody they knew. And that's all we are to each other anymore, right? And I have so many people in my life like that now. But I also, the title of the album really was inspired by that, and also thinking about having my first relationship in my life romantically, right? And thinking about that I am now someone he knows and he is someone I know. And so it's all the aspects. And this album really is a journey, even chronologically, in the stories that this album tells. It starts in heartache and it moves to hope. And so some of these songs are about heartache and some of them are exciting and they're about hope. And like the song I released, Piedmont Park, which is the first music video I put out, is a song that was inspired walking around Piedmont Park in downtown Atlanta, which is kind of like their Central Park, and thinking about how beautiful it is to experience something I never had gotten to experience before, and daydreaming about that and wanting to capture all those feelings of finally getting to experience that in that song. And so yeah, the album starts in heartache, and by the time you hit Piedmont Park in the album, it turns to hope. And there's song 1984, which I released during the pandemic on the album, that is kind of a love letter. I have a friend that is a little older than me, maybe around your age, growing up in the 80s, lost many friends due to the AIDS pandemic. And he wanted to send a love letter from the LGBT community that went through the AIDS pandemic to the people going through this pandemic now with COVID, and to be a letter of love and of hope, and from that generation of queer people that went through that. And obviously losing my uncle to AIDS, it talks about that in the song as well, but it is a song of hope and saying we can do this. And I'm really proud of that. It's a really beautiful song to me. But yeah, so somebody you knew, it means a lot of different things. It is about the heartbreak of the people that don't know me anymore, but it's also the people that know me in a new way and that want to know the real me. And it kind of represents all of that in that journey.
Listening to a lot of your music, so much of it is that desire to just be loved for who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, gosh, I feel like I have so much to write about, which is a fun place to be this far into my career and into my life. And I think, as somebody who always wanted to be honest in my songwriting and self-aware, and when there was this major part of myself that I couldn't be, and that was kind of blocked off, if you think about that in the sense of writer's block, to have that finally burst open when I came to terms with myself and could love myself, I've just felt like I've had so much to write about and so much to share and so many experiences that I've wanted to share. And I did put out my first solo album after coming out. I hung up my old band and I put out my Love is Love album. And now this is my second album that I'm putting out, Somebody You Knew. And it's fun that it feels like the most meaningful project I've ever done, to be this far into my career and to get to put out what I feel like is my best work is a very wonderful feeling.
That's awesome. And I mean, Love is Love is beautiful. Thank you. Love it. And tell me the story behind Hey Jesus.
Yeah. That song I wrote a few years back, and I wrote it actually in the room that I'm sitting in right now. I was just sitting here with a guitar, and I just thinking about all the feelings I had always felt growing up and wanting God to love me, and kind of that tradition of Christianity and Jesus. Like, it was very common and is very common to pray to Jesus. And so I just spilled out of me all the feelings I had ever felt growing up, wanting to be loved for who I am. And honestly, it probably just hit me out of nowhere. I wrote the song in less than a half hour, and then I probably spent a couple hours laying on the floor crying my eyes out. And it just feels
and
like
I think yeah.
It just feels like an honest representation of those feelings. And so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. And I'm sorry, but it, I grew up Jewish, but it's still, I can understand those lyrics of that time where we were fearful of not being loved for who we were.
Absolutely.
The thought of, my father would never have done it. And he was a different generation than my mom. He was 10 years older. He said he would kick me out if he thought I was gay. Never would have happened. My mother would have kicked him out.
Sure.
But I was very lucky on my mother, my mother, like your wife, my mother asked me.
Oh, wow. There you go. It's awesome that she had the courage to do that and the love to do that. And
she did. I was blessed, but I could hear that desire in those lyrics. And I'm not, it's interesting because I'm not somebody who always hears the lyrics. I love music. I love to dance. Dance is like my thing, but to hear and, take in lyrics for me isn't something that always processes the normal way where somebody cries over a song. But, listening to some of your songs, I can really feel sort of that pain sometimes and that desire to be loved. So, bravo to you. And
thank you.
How excited are you to get back on the road and play this music this summer?
I'm so excited. I just did my first show for the tour in Portland last week, and it was kind of a special album listening party, and I played all the songs from the album, and it was on the rooftop of a skyscraper downtown Seattle, and it was such an awesome experience. And I'm continuing the tour next week in Encinitas, California, and then doing Columbus Pride Festival, Broadway Sings for Pride in New York. I'm doing Nashville Pride and all kinds of other shows across the country. And I'm very excited to play these songs, share them with people. I'm excited for the PBS special, of course. And it just feels really exciting, really meaningful. I am doing a special re-release of that song, Hey Jesus, with the new album, with an up-and-coming artist who's killing it right now. Their name is Semler, and it's a queer friend of mine who grew up a preacher's kid and has kind of been subverting the whole system and is killing it. And so kind of, it's been neat to see how Hey Jesus has taken on a life of its own. It just keeps growing, keeps kind of getting found out by more and more people. And it just feels like sort of a timeless thing. And I wanted to honor that a bit. That is one of the songs I'm singing with the American Pops Orchestra on the special. Wow. And, it's just something I'm really proud of and excited for. So, yeah.
So when are you in New York for the Broadway Pride thing?
It was supposed to be June 20th, but I think they're pushing it back. I think NBC's a sponsor for the thing, and they're working out some details. So I will be updating that information as soon as possible. But you should be able to see all my tour dates on Bands in Town, the app, or TreyPearson.com.
Well, we have to grab a drink in New York when you're here.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I can't wait. Thank you for having me as a part of this.
Absolutely. But let's talk about what's the hardest part of being an independent artist?
Oh my gosh. Marketing. Obviously I don't have all of the marketing budget and connections as major record labels do, right? And so I'm just kind of doing it on my own and have been since I came out. After I hung up my old Christian band, my contract was up with my label. I didn't want to re-sign in that faith-based world anymore. Obviously, I still write about everything that I feel, everything I'm going through, whether it's about sort of my faith tradition with a song like Hey Jesus, or Love is Love, or, everything in between, all these first experiences of Piedmont Park and the heartache. And so I love, on a good note, I'll say I love being able to do whatever I want, to write about whatever I want, to be as honest as I want and can be. And at the same time, there are those it's not like I have some marketing machine reaching out to people like you or publicists. I did just connect with an indie publicist company, though, that wants to help me out and is just started to work with me and already found a first feature to be reviewed by music sites and things like that. So it is fun having people champion you and people that want to see you do well. And obviously that's people like you, Alan, and I'm very grateful for that. And it's definitely a word of mouth grassroots thing, but I love it. And
people can
I'm very
support
grateful
you
to do it. Yes.
People can support you if they go to TreyPearson.com. They can.
Yeah, I have a Patreon, and I could not have made this album if it wasn't for my Patreon supporters. And I couldn't say yes to doing the things that I do with my shows and with my tour and with making videos and making this music. And so, yeah, if you would like to help me continue to do that, that is always very meaningful. But I'm very grateful to have that community and support.
That's awesome. Do you know Bright Light, Bright Light?
I don't.
Check him out.
Okay.
He's an independent artist who I adore. I found him through a friend a number of years ago.
Awesome.
He is LGBTQ. He is a he went on tour with Elton and Cher.
Wow.
But he is an independent artist.
Bright Light.
Yes. He's very similar, writes his own.
Cool.
Great artist. I'd be happy to make an introduction.
Yeah, I love that.
He's phenomenal. And here, I'm going to take a picture of us. I'm going to count us down. Ready?
Okay, let's do it. Yeah.
1, 2, and 3. Trey, it's such a pleasure. Yes. Oh, well, let me make sure that our eyes are open because you never know. Yes, they are. Really a pleasure. Thank you for your honesty, your bravery. I know what it was like for me in the 80s, where religion really didn't play any part. And I know how difficult that can be and dangerous, really. So your honesty is certainly going to help a lot of young folks who will go through their own journey,
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, and
you are so welcome.
For the work that you do, and I cannot wait to grab that drink in New York City.
Me too. All right. You stay well. Bye, Trey.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Like I said, go to TreyPearson.com and support Trey and his music. It's beautiful music. Join me next Wednesday when the Young and the Restless's Greg Rickhart joins me live right here. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so. You can turn on the notifications for reminders of all upcoming shows so you don't miss one. And I hope everybody has a great weekend. And most importantly, in these crazy times, please stay safe, everyone. Have a great weekend.